Um, 2.5 years ago, we did a series right before, as a church, we were raising a bunch of money, trying to figure out what buildings we were going to build, to see what buildings God would want us to build, to move forward and all those things. And we did that series on Wednesday nights as well. And we did it during our high school service. And there was like less than 30 of us in the room. And one of the things we talked about is we said, hey, look at how large that our room is. And there are like less than 30 high school students in a town of, I don't know, a couple thousand of you. And so we said, as we're looking at that, let's be less concerned about buildings that will come, and let's be more concerned about God filling up the room that he's already given us. And there are some of you that were with us 2.5 years ago when we scattered around the room. And we prayed over our room, we prayed over our building. Do some of you remember that? Some of my high school students? I know, it's like thinking about 10 years ago. So what I want you to enjoy that we don't often do is sometimes we pray for something and we don't realize that we're sitting in the middle of it. And so what I want you to enjoy is we are sitting in the middle of the thing that we prayed for 2.5 years ago. And I don't know about you, but I'm having a crap load of fun sitting in the middle of that answered prayer. And so that's been really cool for me. It's been really, really cool. For our adults, you can't see what we see, which is awesome. But when we have adults like squeezing in through the back doors and like standing room only in the back, not because of the product that we create, but because of the worship that we do and the God that we worship, I just think that's really cool. And so I enjoy that. I enjoy being a part of that. And I'm thankful that you let me be a part of that. And I like to take moments to enjoy the good gifts that God has given us. In the midst of that, we're in a series called Tragic Hero, where we're looking at the story of David through 1 Samuel. And if you want to, if you're not good at Bible study, you don't ever know where to start, I'll give you something to kind of keep you occupied for the next week or so, that we're going to jump around in chapters 18 and 20 a little bit. But we're reading about David and this guy, Jonathan. And so if you wanted to read the entirety of that story, you could really read between 18 and 20 and read those 3 chapters over the next couple weeks and see that story unfold and what that friendship is like. But we're going to look today. Last week we looked at how David was faithful, right? That when the rest of the nation of Israel wouldn't go fight Goliath, David was like, I'll take on the giant. I'll cut off his head, I'll give it to the king, and I'll feed his army to the birds. Like it was super metal. It was like a rated R passage in the midst of it. Like I enjoyed the heck out of it. It is not the David and Goliath that you get in kids ministry where they're like, and then he threw that rock at the Goliath's forehead, and then we forget the head cutting off. We should be told as third graders, and then they chopped his head off, and he put it on a silver platter, and he took it to the king. They're like, that's the David and Goliath that I love. That is the hardcore version of David and Goliath. It's the biblical version. Jesus is hardcore. That's our next shirt for next spring. But when we walk into chapter 18 and we walk into the moment that David is before King Saul, and we see kind of this first interaction with Jonathan. But right before we jump into that, what I want you to think about where we're going tonight is this idea that David has faithful friends. David is faithful, but there will be times in our life where we struggle to be faithful, where our backs are against the wall, where we're asking God to make a way, and he's miracle worker, he's way maker, he's all these things, but even in the midst of that, we need a faithful friend. And so one of my favorite movies of all time, it's my favorite Pixar movie, is Toy Story. I know, it's wonderful. I love Toy Story. If you walk into my office, there's like a little pop doll of Woody, and there's a couple paintings on the wall that are designed around Toy Story because I'm like 12 years old and I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. You should be okay with that. Toy Story is a long-standing series, like it's 4 movies across a whole lot of years. And in the midst of that, when Toy Story 4 came out, because I thought, like, surely Toy Story 3 is the end, but it is not. And they gave us a 4th. Why? Because God is the giver of good gifts, and so is Pixar. Okay, and so in the midst of that, there's this clip in Toy Story 4 that we will watch and we will enjoy together. It'll be a cinematic adventure that we all go on right about now. Maybe, if my clicker works. Yeah, it does. And that's how the movie ends. Slinky gets cut in half. It's sad. It's not the story we thought they were going to give us, but it's the story we got. No, I'm kidding. Here's the deal, man. When I watch Toy Story, I'm reminded that you and I, we love great stories of friendship, right? Like Toy Story The most violent it gets is like a tussle between Woody and Buzz. The most nudity there is Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, which is inappropriate, but they're married, so it's great in the eyes of the Lord. Like we look at these moments, there's not all of these like things, but we look at Toy Story and we go, I gotta have more. And the reason why is we look at it, there's a lot of weird things about Toy Story. Right? There's a lot of characters that are missing. There's a lot of questions that we should have about Andy's mother and also the sanity of the home, that they never notice toys lying around. Like, we've got all those things, and we love the story between Andy and the toys. We're like, that's adorable, but also, like, at 18, bro, dude, like, you gotta let go. You gotta move on. It should be easier for you. And so we have these things, but primarily what we love about Toy Story is that Pixar makes inanimate objects, animates them, and makes us feel things for them that we feel as people, right? We see Woody and Bo Peep, a lamp and a cowboy doll, and we're like, oh, I want that kind of love. Like we're like, that is beautiful. And we look at that and we go, man. And then we go, man, Woody and Buzz. Friendship for like, it's a legend. It's a tale as old as time, which is a different Disney movie. But we look at it and we go, man, Buzz and Woody, they start off hating each other. Then they go on some epic adventure. And now they love each other. Like, they'll go to the death for each other. They'll rescue each other, right? Toy Story 2, Buzz goes after Woody. He leaves the 99, goes for the 1. It's this wonderful movie. But here's what I love about this moment in Toy Story 4. Is it gives us this moment, and it's going to explain to us where Bo Peep was in the last movie, which is a question that we all had, and rightfully so. They should have to answer it. She's an incredible character. But in the midst of it, it gives us this moment with RC. Now, I don't know if you've watched a lot of the Toy Story movies, but RC is a character that no one gives a rip about. Like, no one is questioning at any point in time, like, you know what we needed more of? The race car. He can't talk. All he does is vroom. He's not even there for like 50% of the adventures. But then you have this moment in the rain where all of a sudden RC is your favorite character. And as much as all the toys would fight for each other, they go rescue each other, they die for each other, now we have this moment where all the toys, we find out they'll go to bat for RC. Like, they'll go to bat for any toy. They will go on a rescue mission for any toy. And we go, man, all of a sudden, you don't want the Woody and Buzz friendship. You want the Woody and RC friendship, which for the past 3 movies has been no friendship at all. But in 3 minutes, they tell this incredible story that you go, man, if I was drowning in a gutter or a ditch, whatever it is, I would want Woody and a team of monkeys to come out. Like, I want that friend. I want my best friend and a team of monkeys to come after me, which is what some of your friends are. I've met them. And it's incredible. We love these stories because we love to put ourselves in them, and we watch them and we go, that is me and right now, y'all are like, I got my best friend and my monkeys. I love them, right? Like, you're like, I got those people. But then simultaneously what happens is a lot of times we watch these and we may put us and a friend in the midst of that story, and we can tell that story. We're like, man, that's me and so-and-so. We're going to dress up like that for the next Halloween. We're going to dress up that during homecoming week. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be wonderful. But then there are times in our life where we go, man, I don't understand that storyline at all. And primarily we love great stories of friendship because it's what our soul is longing for. It's not that we're living that story. It's that we want that story. And that even if we feel like we have good friends, we've grown up with them, they're around us all the time, that we still find ourselves at times in life where we go, but that doesn't feel like that's my friend group, or even how I would like define my best friendship. And so we then see these stories and we love them not because we're living them, but because we want them, because our soul longs for them. And it's at that moment, man, that we walk into the story of David. And we're coming off the heels of this great battle versus Goliath, and there's going to be this interaction between him and Jonathan. And what we see tonight, and what we're really going to see in the rest of the story of David, is that the people in his life matter. That the God in his life is powerful, and he's faithful to that God, but that same God gives him faithful people with him along the way. And that all of us, each and every one of us, man, we need just that one faithful friend that in the midst of a time where you're actually the most connected that any generation has ever been, you are the least connected that any generation has ever been. In the midst of 100, some of you thousands of followers, you can't find one friend. Or you have trouble being one friend. That to be known or to know someone terrifies the mess out of you. But we walk into the story of David and we see how necessary that one is. David's fought this battle. He's going to see King Saul. And in chapter 18, verse 1, we see this. When David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship. And he loved him as much as he loved himself. Saul kept David with him from that day on and did not let him return to his father's house, right? Like David inadvertently moved out when he went to go kill Goliath. He was like, I really should have brought some sheets with me. This feels like I was ill prepared. Jonathan made a covenant with David, just a promise, a very important promise, a binding promise with David because he loved him as much as he loved himself. And then Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing, gave it to David along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. We see this, man. If you're reading in a different translation, some of them say that their souls were knit together, which is not usually how bros talk about their friendship with one another. Like no dude is leaving here tonight and be like, "This is my best friend." Our souls, they're knit together. Like before this, we're in our leadership meeting, and some of the kids help us play in the loft, and we're sitting and we're getting ready to pray together. And like some of y'all are like, let's interlock fingers. And I'm like, I'd rather cut my fingers off. Like that, no. Man, but David and Jonathan, in this moment, says their souls were knit together. They had a friendship that's just different. It's important, man. Jonathan loved David just as much as he loved himself. And what happens is Saul, who's the king, David has already basically been anointed by God to be the future king. It's not super public knowledge yet, but it's the process where David is becoming king. And David becomes very popular primarily because he's really, really, really great at killing enemy armies. The phrase is, Saul has killed his thousands, which, by the way, is a really high kill count. But David has killed his 10,000s. And so as impressive as Saul is as war hero and king, and Saul he's good looking, he's a man of great stature, like he's very impressive. They go, as great as he is, David, that guy is awesome. Saul gets jealous because the people begin to want David as king, and so Saul decides, like any normal, rational, mentally healthy person would do, and he says, I will then kill David. That's not normal, rational. That's not how it works, right? But Jonathan's in this hard place where Jonathan is like, I love David. David's my best friend, and my dad wants to kill him. Now, let me be very clear. I had a lot of friends that my parents did not approve of. None of them were like targets in my home. Like there were never hitmen after them. But Jonathan gets caught in this mess where his dad wants to kill his best friend. And so in the midst of these things, and David is constantly like avoiding these attacks from Saul. And then David and Jonathan are having this conversation that we're about to read, where Jonathan says some things, and we see really just how much Jonathan loves David, because you really find out how much you love somebody when daddy wants to kill them. Like that's when you find out what the friendship is like. And so we see this in chapter 20, verse 12. This is Jonathan talking to David, and he says, by the Lord, the God of Israel, I will sound out my father by this time tomorrow or the next day. And if I find out that he is favorable toward you, will I not send for you and tell you? If my father intends to bring evil on you, may the Lord punish Jonathan. He talks in third person because he's a legend. And do so severely if I do not tell you and send you away so you may leave safely. May the Lord be with you, just as he was with my father. And if I continue to live, show me kindness from the Lord. But if I die, don't ever withdraw your kindness from my household. Not even when the Lord cuts off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. And then Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord hold David's enemies accountable. Jonathan once again swore to David in his love for him because he loved him as he loved himself. Listen, we have a lot of friendships that we're like, I would die for you. Jonathan means it. Like he's making a covenant that his murderous father, he will protect his friend from. Like, that's loyalty. It would actually make a lot more sense in the story, even though David has no fault, even though David has done nothing wrong, David has the Spirit of God on his side. The story would make more sense if Jonathan was like, yeah, but Dad, and we share blood, so I'm on team kill David. Like, that would make sense to the story. But he says, hey, no, I'm going to go to bat for you. I'm going to find out what my dad wants to do to you. I'm going to make a way out for you. And what happens following this is a series of attacks from Saul on David's life, and Jonathan regularly helping him get out of it and helping him get away from that. That Jonathan actively opposes his father for the sake of his friend. I mean, it's loyalty. And it saves David's life. David has faithful friends, and faithful friends are life-saving. Now, catch this. It's probably not likely that one of your friends' dads wants to kill you. Again, I've met some of you, maybe. But it's not likely. But it stands that having faithful friends is still life-saving. We go, well, man, how is Jonathan faithful? When we look at those passages, we see three things that's incredibly important. Man, Jonathan loves David. He is for David. And he protects David. He loves David just as much as he loves himself. And let's be honest, we love ourselves a lot. Even if you're like me and you grew up as a teenager with maybe some self-worth issues and some things like that, at the end of the day, man, you still, because you desire great friendship, you believe that you need that great friendship and that you deserve that great friendship. At the end of the day, you probably see yourself in higher regard than you see a good majority of people. Even if you compare yourself to them and you're like, oh, I'm not as good as them, you still probably elevate yourself higher than them in importance and necessity pretty often. And in the midst of that, Jonathan says, man, I love David just as much as I love myself. And he's for David. He wants to see David succeed when he gets in a fight with his dad and talks about how the Spirit of God is on David. He sees what God is doing in David's life, and he is for that, and he wants to see that played out. Man, and Jonathan protects David. Jonathan puts his own life in the way for the sake of his friend, his own reputation, his own relationships, for the sake of his friend. We need that kind of faithful friend. We don't need 70. We don't need 7. We need 1. We need that friend that when everybody else is gathered around and they're talking bad at you, whether you deserve it or you don't, that doesn't join in on that. We need that kind of friend that when it becomes uncool to be around you, that when you're not doing what everybody else is doing, that they're going to stand with you. You need that kind of friend that when gossip breaks out on you, that person is next to you. That when you fail big, that person is next to you. That when the rain comes, they have an umbrella. You need that kind of friend. And some of us, we look at this and we go, man, I have a friend like that. Maybe I have all 3 of those things. But what I want to remind you too is that the thing that makes Jonathan the most important in the life of David is that Jonathan loves the Lord. If someone is for you, and if they love you, and if they protect you, but you know Jesus and they don't, there will come a day that love will not match up. They will not be for you in the way that you need them to be for you. Because your God is not their God. That every one of us, man, we need those 3 things, but we need a friend who desperately loves Jesus. That in all things, the reason Jonathan can stand by David is because he's pointing him to Jesus and he sees the Spirit of God at work in the life of David. That a friend that's for you is going to steer you towards Jesus, not towards your other affections, not towards your other desires. They're going to steer you towards Jesus. That a friend that wants to protect you is going to protect you from the things that are not of Jesus. That a friend that loves you, their love will match that of Jesus. Jonathan loves his God. We need that kind of friend. We need that kind of faithful friend in our life. But more than that, some of us need to learn to become that friend. You can't always control other people becoming that friend, but you can decide that you will be that friend. And let me tell you, if you are that friend, people want to be friends with that person because they probably don't have that in their lives. And let me tell you, if you talk about other people behind their back, you are not their friend, and you are not that friend. You go, well, I would never talk about that person that way. Not now. But they're one decision away from them being the person that you're talking about. And let me tell you, if you think, oh man, I have that friend, but they talk about other people around you or in front of you or with you, they probably won't be that friend for long. Because you're one move away from being the person they talk about, the person that they're not for. And you know that because you see that. I don't think that Jonathan and David get together and they trash talk other people because it would just ruin the integrity of the heart that they have for one another. It wouldn't even make sense. To become that friend. And so as much as we ask ourselves and we go, oh, I want my own Jonathan, we say, oh man, who is your Jonathan? But whose Jonathan are you? I talked with our leadership team before this, so we talked about this, and here's my desire. Here's why we do small groups. Here's why we do everything that we do. As much as I want the best band up here, as much as I want to be the best communicator that I can be, as much as I love the Wheel of Doom, and I love the Wheel of Doom, like as much as all that is great, and I believe the content of what we do is great, and that the product of what we do is great, that my real goal for what we do as adults and for what we do as students is that we help you come into contact with Jesus and teenagers who know Jesus, and that we're the most relational place in town. Not that everybody has a relationship with me, but that everybody has a relationship with somebody in this room, that they can find a place called home maybe before they ever know who Jesus is. Because it's a room full of Jonathans. That we're for each other, that we love each other, that we protect each other, every one of us, just because we find ourselves in this room together, that we don't turn on each other, because since we all belong to the same room, since we all belong to Jesus, if we've given our lives to him, then it stands that we love each other the way that Jonathan loves David. And so if you're sitting across the section from somebody that you find a hard time loving in that way and treating with that same respect, then it's time to get right with Jesus, because you are probably keeping that person from knowing him. And this will not be a place that people can come and be hated and slip through the cracks. This will be a place that people find their Jonathan. That may make me sound mean, and I don't care. Because we will be that place, whether there's 70 of us or 700 of us. The loft will be a place that people can find their Jonathan because it is full of them. When I was in college, I hate to break it to you, you're in the easiest time in your life to find friends. It's just true. Call up any of our students that have graduated in the last 2 years and ask them. Ask any of our adults. Because what will happen from here is you'll graduate, you'll move to a place that is created for you to find relationships with other people, but it'll still be really hard because you didn't grow up with them, they don't know you, and there's something nice about home, even though you're like, no, I hate home. Again, call me in like a year. But in the midst of that, you'll go and you'll maybe even make friends from there, but then you'll graduate from that place and you'll go into this place called the real world, and the real world doesn't care about people between the ages of 20 and 30. As a matter of fact, every town and city in the state is just a black hole for people between 20 and 30 to fall off the map, be lonely, and watch Netflix. It's how the company exists, okay? And so in the midst of that, when I was at A&M and I was in my freshman year, my first semester, I was the most miserable, I was the most depressed, I was the saddest I have ever been. And the second semester started, and I met a group of people, and I found myself in a circle with a bunch of guys that were getting to know each other, and man, we're talking about our struggles, and we're talking about Jesus, and we're talking about what we want God to do in our lives, what we think God is doing in our lives. We talk about how we're not following God at all, and how some of us are very, very far from Him. I'm sitting next to this guy named Steven, and I am 6'2", 145 pounds. I have been that size, I've been that weight since I was 16 years old. For 11 years, my body has not changed. Steven is sitting next to me. Steven is 6'6", 245 on a light day. He is a man. He is a beast. I have no facial hair at this point in time. I look 12 years old in the face and in like the rest of me. Steven looks 40 years old. He's got a full-grown beard, and he takes 2 chairs just the way that he sits. And we're sitting next to each other, and we're just talking about Jesus and what's doing in our lives and what our struggles are. And they're like very, very similar for guys that are completely different. He literally looks like a living, breathing cartoon lumberjack. And we sit in the midst of that, and what happens is me and Steven become best friends. I leave my house at the end of my sophomore year. I go and I move in with Steven, and it's just us living in the same house, and then this really cool thing happens where he's dating this girl, and then I'm dating this girl, and both of those girls, they move in to the same house, and we're just all friends. I mean, we double date together, we go to games together, like we get to the point where we're like, oh, crap, we don't have any other friends, like it's just us four, like, and I'm not sad about it, right? And we're hanging out all the time, we go everywhere, and what happened in the course of between ages 20 and 22, Steven was my Jonathan. I would come home after a long day, and me and Steven would go to the back porch, and we'd sit on the back porch on the swing that was out there, and we would just sit there and we'd just talk about our day. What's going on, what God's doing in our dating life, what we hope God will do in our dating life. Maybe one day Haley will love me, maybe not, we'll see. Right? Spoiler alert, she does, I think, most days. And things weren't always great. But there's this one moment, and dudes, you'll get me, right? Because we don't show emotion very well. Like, we don't have it. We put it way down, and then we shake it up like a soda, and it explodes one day, and it comes out of nowhere. And there was this one dark weekend in college that we can talk about because we're on the happier end of it now. And on a Friday, things were not so great in paradise, as they would say. And me and the now missus were fighting before she was the missus. And we get in this crazy knockdown, drag-out fight, and Haley's getting ready to go home to be with her parents, and at the end of the fight, she dumps me, which we should have seen coming at some point in our lives because it's her and because it's me, and that just feels like the natural span of things, right? And we get to the end of it, and I'm 21 years old, I'm a mess, and I go back to my house, and Steven's there, and his girlfriend's there, and they're watching like HGTV or something because they're psychopaths, and I walk in the door, and I'm just like, now, I had left the house already in said fight. When I come back from said fight in tears, you don't ask what happened, you kind of just know. And so we walk in, and Steven looks at his girlfriend, Emily, and he goes, I think it's time for you to leave. It's like, yes, it is. Get out of my house. And I walk in, and I'm in my living room, and our souls are bonded in this moment, and I just sit next to my friend, and he just puts his arm around me, and we just sit there in not really silence because of the sobbing that was incessant, but in whatever silence that we had created, and we just sat there. No great words of wisdom. He didn't like break out his Bible and go, and the Lord has a plan for you. He didn't do any of that. He was just a dude who loved the dude that he lived with like we were just friends. And I had only experienced that at one other point in my life in high school, and so here I am at 22 at some of the hardest years of my life, and I'm like, I need a faithful friend who loves Jesus and who loves me. And 3 days later, like any good breakup, me and Haley got back together, we're married, we have a kid, and everything's good. But, yeah. Thanks, honey. Yeah. You're gonna scare the baby that we have, but that's cool. No. But I say that because here's the deal. At 27, let me tell you, Steven is not my best friend. He lives in Kansas. I love him. I message him all the time because he's renovating his entire house, and the dude can do some things with tile that the Lord just did not bless me with. And we talk about house renovations, again, because we're 27 and married and we're boring now. Whoever your Jonathan is will not be your Jonathan forever. But everyone needs their Jonathan in a season. Who is your Jonathan? Whose Jonathan are you?